Moving on to the final sheet in week 2, this is the aim of the final sheet is to introduce the concept of nested for loops, which is effectively a for loop within another for loop. So here we've been given the same annual returns for 30 stocks from 1997-2005. Average returns we've already calculated, so I've just calculated that by running the macro average stocks again on this sheet, and that'll calculate those, you'll find, if you run that average return macro. But now we want to build the excess return macro, which is a macro that will calculate excess return for every single stock and every single year. Now you know from lectures that excess return is just each return, so for example that 1997 American Airlines return minus the average return, tells you the excess return for that year. So we just want that stock there equal that minus that. But do it for every single cell, every single year, every single stock. Alright, so let's go into VisualBasic and start to write this code. So we'll call this macro, this subroutine, excess returns. And we need to first define the answer. So we'll define this matrix here as y, we'll just call it y. And now we have to define the size of y. Now before we had x30 because it was 30 wide. Now we have, because it's 9 by, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 9 by 30. So we have to define it as 9, 30, which defines it as it's 9 rows by 30 columns. And again as double because it's two-dimensional, it's more than one stock. So there it was 1 by 30, now it's 9 by 30. It's two-dimensional, that's why we have to say as double. Alright, and then we'll say for each column, for column 1 to 30. Oops, sorry, and put a space in there. Put spaces. So for column 1 to 30. So that'll do for every single column. Then for row 1 to 9, because there's 9. So this nested, that's the nested for loop there. What it's saying is for each column 1 to 30. So do it for every column, and then do it within each column. Do it for every single row. That's why it's saying for row 1 to 9. Okay, and then we want the answer y to be equal to row minus 1, column minus 1. Now we have to do this for the same reason we did that y minus 1 before. Set it equal to range. So from here we're just defining that same range there, so that's the size of all the returns. So from B7 to A15, so for all those cells, row and column. So before it was just columns, so that's why we just did columns I. For here we want all cells, row and column. So that's what that is there. That's each of these returns, so all those returns there. Get them and then subtract the averages. So we want it to subtract this array here. So we go subtract range B19, because remember that's B19 to AE19. Sorry. So grab A19 to AE19. And then we want it to do, so it'll start off doing that for column 1, row 1, which is here. So it'll do it for that one minus that one. Then we want it to do it for the next row. So that's why we type next row. We want it to do it for the next row, next year, 98. And then once you've done all the rows, we want it to do it for the next column. So it'll keep going next row, next row, next row, next row until it's done all the rows, 1 to 9, and then it will go next column, do it for the next stock. So that's all the calculation involved in calculating the excess return. Now we just need to display it. So we can do that by going, we want to display it in the range B23 to AE31. So we can just enter that range there, B23 to AE31 dot value equals y, so that y value here, and that's it. So now if we go and play that macro, access returns, there you go, it's calculated all each return minus the average return. Now one little point here, you might go, these numbers don't quite calculate correctly. The reason is these are numbers to, a few decimal points there, but they're only displayed into 2 decimal points to make it easier to see. So that's why those numbers there may be slightly out. But if you actually do, equals that minus that, that's the correct answer there.